So I received a text last night, interestingly enough, and unsolicited and more random than anything, from Jeff Wilson. And
I thought you were going to say Clive Palmer for a second. But,
no, I've got a few of those. Yes, I have had a few of those. Trauma to Patriot ones. No, but I received this text from Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson runs a fund, and he's a very successful guy here in Sydney. And he sent me a copy of a paper about unrealised gains, capital gains in super funds and the proposed tax on those gains. And I thought, wow, that's knowing I was seeing you today. That is a really important point I need to put to you. And I said to Jeff I would put it to you. He's a good friend of mine. I said I would put it to you. And he's actually prepared a white paper on it, or his organisation prepared a white paper on it, which I might actually send over to you. And
sure.
But where everyone's forgotten about this. I think the amount is $3 million. If you have in your super fund, because you've worked hard and you've been able to contribute over 1 million years, enough money to get over $3 million worth of assets, but you haven't sold them, they're just valued at that. Under the proposal by the Labor Party, which is what Jeff was bringing to my attention last night again, was that you'll be paying tax on that. And I don't know how you pay tax on an unrealised gain. I don't know where you get the money from to pay tax on something as unrealised, because you don't have the cash, because you haven't realised the gain. What's the position of the Liberal Party, of the coalition, on this stuff?
So, Mark, we opposed it straight away when the government proposed it, and they've tried now, I think, to sort of push the boundaries on this. They've done research on abolition of negative gearing and cutting out the discount on capital gains tax on the sale of an asset held for longer than 12 months as well. So I think there is a broader issue here of credibility. So the Prime Minister went to the last election saying no changes to super tax, and of course this change then came in. And I equate it to, if you're a wage earner, if you're a tradie or you are working for a boss, it's like charging you tax, like you're having to pay the tax office the tax before you get paid your wage for that week. And if you're in a super fund and you've got a farm in that super fund, which many rural families do, or if you're a family, maybe second, third generation family with a block of shops or a couple of units, or if you've got shares that have just done really well, you've picked a couple of cracking shares that have taken off. For that 12-month period, you might have seen an increase in value in the block of flats or in the price of his shares. You haven't realised the gain. So if the price has gone from $1 up to $5, you're taxed on that capital gain. And the next 12 months, the shares might come back. There might be a crash. The valuation that you've had to pay for again for the building that you've got in your super fund might show that prices have come off, or perhaps you've got vacancies and the yield's gone down in relation to the shops that you've got.
It could be a recession and all that.
It could be anything, right? You could have a development application that's approved. You've sunk a lot of money into getting the development application, and it increases the price of the block of land that you're holding or whatever it is. You're going to pay tax under Labor's model, and it raises a few $1 billion, so they know that it's really going to hurt. And if you're in a super fund and you haven't got much cash in the super fund, if you are a farmer, for example, and you've got limits as to how much money you can put on depending on how old you are, as to how much money you can put into that fund, you might be forced into a position where you've got to sell the asset to pay the tax bill. And I just think it's unjust and it's unfair. And
but it's also nonsense.
Well, it absolutely it is. But it captures, like people might say now, $3 million in your super fund, if only. But this will capture with inflation people over the coming years. It's not indexed, so the $3 million doesn't go up each year. So this will capture more and more taxpayers each year. And as I say, if you've inherited some money and you've put it into your super, or you've just listened to the financial advisors who have said, okay, pile as much money as you can into super because it's a safe asset class, you're now going to come within scope over the course of the next few years. Like, we've fought really hard against this. Labor and the Greens strongly support it. And again, I think it gives a window into Labor's thinking. It's that we can take money away from you because we think you've done too well, and that's sort of the socialism that's at operation. That's at the heart of the operation of the Labor and Greens parties. That it's wealth redistribution. And Jeff Wilson, who I know well also, I mean, one of the smartest financial minds in the country, he's horrified by all of this, and most financial advisors are.
Paul Keating be horrified by it.
Paul Keating would be. He wouldn't recognise it in terms of what the Labor Party is proposing here, and it provides a disincentive as well, because a lot of financial advisors will be saying to younger people, "Look, actually, I wouldn't be putting that much money into super now because it's just risky. We don't know whether the $3 million is going to be brought down if Labor needs to create more tax and more revenue. Maybe they'll drop the $3 million down to $2 million and you'll be captured by that." So the whole idea of super is that it's a safe place to invest and it's going to provide for your retirement. But if you take away that certainty, younger people are just going to say, well, actually, no, I'm not going to tip money into super, and, we sold, a car or a boat. Instead of spending that money, we're going to dump it into super. Those people will stop doing that. And I think that's, I think that is a really bad outcome. Not enough people are talking about it. And as I say, it also then says, well, if Anthony Albanese told you before the last election that there were not going to be any tax changes around super, he's saying the same thing now around the family home. But we know that they've done the work on what negative gearing abolition looks like and what the abolition of the CGT 50% discount looks like as well. So that I think gives a window into the thinking of the Labor Party, and that they'll always want to tax more because they always want to spend more. But that's what puts interest rates up as well.
I hope you don't mind if I don't want to labour this point, but it's quite important to someone like me. I think about the kids, the 20-year-old kids. Let's call them even the 15-year-old kids, but maybe they're not voting. But let's say your grandkids or my grandkids, in my case, or I could be thinking about young people who are just turning 20, getting the first job. They're going to work for 45 years.
Yes.
And they're going to be putting the money into this great thing that, look, let's give it to Keating. Great thing that Keating came up with in the 90s. A great thing. And it's about building up enough wealth so you can retire comfortably, because every Australian works their butt off and they deserve to retire comfortably.
100%.
And the whole regime about this is having concessional tax rates on your super fund and the money the super fund made. That's the whole premise. A kid who's 20 in 45 years' time will probably will have to have more than $3 million worth of assets to be able to live comfortably.
No doubt about that.
And so that person right now want to get their act together and think about what they're going to do, because if this goes through, this is an existential threat to what was originally designed by Jim Chalmers's greatest person in his life, Paul Keating. And I just can't believe that they actually even talking about it or considering it. Is this a real risk of getting a pass by it through Parliament?
Well, yes. And again, it wasn't, nothing was mentioned about it before the election. It's one of the key broken promises. And to your point too, which I think is really well made, that the reason that we've got a concessional taxation arrangement, that is people are paying lower tax in super when the money's compounding and you're earning and building that nest egg up, is because it's your money ultimately. Whilst the boss takes it out before you see it and sends it off to your super fund, it's your money and you can't access it. So the price that we as a government are saying to you for putting that money aside, not being able to use it to buy a boat or go on a holiday or whatever it might be, is that we're going to tax you at a lower rate because we want you to be self-sufficient in retirement, because we've got an ageing population, more people on pensions. And your point is spot on, where you've worked your guts out your whole life. We want you to be able to enjoy your retirement, and super is part of the way in which you're going to be able to do that. But the government just upends all of that logic and thinking that Keating first had in mind. And it's just a tax grab. And it's even worse than that, because you're saying to somebody, okay, we're going to have to pay a valuer during the course of every financial year to work out whether the asset's gone up or down during the course of that year.
Do they understand the cost of valuers for real estate? They charge a percentage of the valuation.
Like thousands and thousands of dollars. So the valuers will be happy because they're going to be paid to do these desktop audits or whatever. I don't know the level of detail. The government hasn't released how much money you'd have to spend in an average super fund to comply with the new change. And there are, as I say, like you get fluctuations in different assets that you've got in your superannuation, whether it's shares or whether it's real property or whatever it might be. So I think there's a real problem here, and I think it shows the difference between the two parties. The Liberal Party will always be better economic managers because most of us come from a business background. Most of us know how to manage money. We've started businesses. We've worked really closely. In my case with Peter Costello and with John Howard. And part of the reason that the economy is suffering at the moment is because there are now 4 budgets where the government has made decisions that have just made life much harder, and people feel that in their own household budgets.
When we talk about that tax on assets of a superannuation fund, I feel as though I'm playing a game of Monopoly and I just landed on the chance square and I've lifted up my chance card and it says pay tax.
Yeah.
It's like a prosperity tax.
Yes.
It's like I've been prosperous for the 12 months as a result of the advice that my advisors have given me as to what I should be buying and investing, and has done well. As a result of that prosperity, you got to pay tax. It doesn't mean I made the money. I didn't earn the dough. It's not too different what Dan Andrews put into Victoria for farmers who have had their land rezoned,
yes,
where the land's gone from being a farm worth one price to being rezoned for housing and become much more valuable. And Dan Andrews went and taxed them before they sold it. And these poor bloody farmers have been forced to sell their property to pay the tax.
That's right. They haven't got the cash, the lazy cash sitting around to pay the uplift tax like that. It's I mean, this is a really interesting point as well, because if Labor's logic is that can apply within superannuation, well, why not outside of super?
Yeah.
So if you've
That's scary.
Yeah, it's really scary, but it would generate them a lot of money. People would pay a lot of tax. And again, I sort of bring it back to the basic point that if you're a tradie and you're getting, however much a week, $1,000 a week, you're being asked to pay the tax man the $200 a week before you get the $1,000, or before you get the $800. And it's wrong in principle, and it discourages investment, and it undermines the certainty about investing in this country. And that's exactly what we've seen in Victoria, where businesses have just pulled money out. They've gone to Adelaide or they've gone to Sydney or Brisbane, and they're employing workers there. And the Labor Party's devastated the Victorian economy, and a lot of Victorians are very angry about it, and rightly so.
It's very interesting. I got quite a lot of branches down in Brisbane, Victoria, and I used to go down there, and they'd always say to me, Dan Andrews this, Dan Andrews that, and then I used to say, but how come he keeps getting in? But now, what's interesting, the mood has completely swung against Dan Andrews and his successors in Victoria in terms of the Labor Party, like completely swung.
Yes, yeah, I think that's right.
And because people eventually worked out that Andrews was just running the joint into the ground. And he was a big spender, like a massive spender. And now he's turned the place into a tax haven for government. And what I mean by that is not a tax haven for consumers, but government there, like the property market in Victoria has suffered because if you own an investment, you pay land tax on the first after the first $50,000 of valuation.
Yes.
Whereas New South Wales is something like 1.15 or something like that, 1.15 million. And the house price is going down. Real estate investment down there is at an all-time low. And as a result of that, less people buying houses, that means they're collecting less stamp duty and they're getting into a bigger hole. And the hole's getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Do you see that? Is that a mentality? Is that a Labor Party mentality? It eventually gets them?
It is. It's a jealousy thing. And it's if you have a look back through the history of this country, where there's only so much tax that people who work hard can pay. And you get to a tipping point where they say, you know what, I'm just withdrawing my effort and I'm not going to build that house, or I'm not going to build that block of units. And it's almost what's happened in the construction sector with the involvement of the CFMEU. I mean, the CFMEU's donated about $12 million to the Labor Party since Anthony Albanese became leader. And so they've let the CFMEU just run riot in the building sector. Productivity's down to about 2.5 days a week, which means it takes twice as long and twice the cost to build an apartment block. And in Victoria, all of that capital is being withdrawn and moved to other states, to New South Wales, for example, as you point out. And at a time when we should be seeing an encouragement to invest into, say, housing, when we need more houses coming online, people are just saying, well, the taxes are too great, and I'm just not going to be this sort of soft target any longer. And my point before about if it's logical for Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese to tax you in that way in superannuation, why not in your other investments, and why not on your house? If your house is worth more than $1 million, and my house is only worth $500,000, then the logic is that you should pay tax so that I can be subsidised in another way. I mean, that is just socialism. It's withdrawing the encouragement, the incentive for entrepreneurialism and for people to invest and grow their businesses, and that ultimately means that less taxes paid, more public servants, become employed, and a lot of that's happened over the last few years, particularly in Victoria.